Okay, we're going to get started here. Thanks everybody for joining us this afternoon. We're really looking forward to the session today. Our topic for today's webinar is around cyber risk. Uh, I'm going to go through a quick high-level agenda here, do some introductions, and then we'll get into the meat of the content. Um, what we're trying to cover here today is the Redesign Group's uh, view of the cyber risk, cyber threat landscape in 2026 and how we're helping clients solve for that. So we'll have that cybersecurity landscape discussion led by Patrick Sullivan. He's going to take you through some of the components of our rapid risk assessment. And then I'm going to take you through some of the ways that we're helping clients out of that assessment process. We'll then wrap up with Q&A via the chat, and then some next steps, which will just be a link to the rapid risk assessment itself. Just some quick background on your presenters for today. So Patrick Sullivan is the CEO of Redesign Trust. He's also the Chief Information Security Officer of the Redesign Group, in addition to serving as the virtual CISO for a number of our customers. He's got 20 plus years of IT and cybersecurity leadership experience. He's led security teams at organizations such as General Electric and their oil and gas division, as well as the London Stock Exchange Group and Refinitiv. And then my name is Troy Sorrento. I have 10 plus years of experience in cybersecurity, go-to-market, and IT go-to-market sales. Previously, I led sales teams at companies like Reported Future in the threat intelligence space, as well as Lookout and Carbon Black on the endpoint security side. Just a quick refresher on the Redesign Group here. If you're not familiar with us or you haven't spoken with us in a while, we were founded 10 plus years ago. We have three core components of our business: Redesign IT, which is our data center focused resale services and integration arm of our business; Redesign Cloud, which is a private cloud hosting practice; and then Redesign Trust, which is a dedicated cybersecurity business unit within the Redesign Group. We have a pretty simple mission. It's to set a new standard for our customers and manufacturers in the space that we serve. And we do this through operating through our core values, which is to provide service to others first, to be unique problem solvers, and focus on forming mutually beneficial long-term partnerships. And this has led to a number of different industry awards and third-party validation. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Patrick. I'm sorry, one last slide here. Sorry, out of order. Our process is inherent to everything that we do. So our process is called the Value with Velocity framework, and it's a pretty simple framework, right? But we apply it across everything that we do within the data center, within cybersecurity, within the private cloud practice that we run. We always start with a data-driven assessment where we collect quantitative and qualitative data from our clients. We produce a current state analysis that reflects what is actually occurring within their environment or the segment that we're evaluating today. We accompany that with a future state proposal, which shows you the art of the possible. If you, as a client, want to move forward, that we have a team of project managers and delivery engineers that will implement that solution for you. And then we have a continuous validation process on the back end. Every client, every project receives a survey. At the end of their project, that survey goes directly to our CEO for ongoing improvements within our pre and post sales process. And obviously, a number of different benefits to that for you as a client or prospective client. We're improving the time to value, we're saving you money, and we're giving you what we feel like is a best-in-class experience from start to finish. This is pertinent to our discussion today because we're going to show you within the cybersecurity space how we leverage this process to help clients improve their risk posture and defend their organization against today's modern threats. So with that being said, I'm going to hand it over to Patrick to touch quickly on the threat landscape in 2026. Patrick.
Awesome. And I appreciate it, Troy. And so before we talk about how to manage cyber risk in 2026, Felt it was important to understand the environment we're operating in because the economics of cyber risk has fundamentally shifted. And Troy, if you jump to the next slide, I'm going to talk through the cyber threat landscape. And so, cyber risk isn't just increasing, it's actually accelerating at a rapid pace through AI-enabled adversaries now have driven a dramatic increase in attack activity. Once these attackers gain access, we're seeing the average breakout time for them to achieve their objectives is now under 30 minutes. That means they're not just getting in, they're moving laterally, escalating privileges, and exfiltrating sensitive data almost immediately. At the same time, the barrier to launching these sophisticated cyber attacks has never been lower. Ransomware as a service, phishing kits, there's zero-day marketplaces. The attacker ecosystem has become industrialized. So it's cheaper, it's faster, and it's more scalable than ever to launch an attack. And that's the threat environment organizations must plan for. But unfortunately, that's only one side of the equation. And Troy, if you go to the next slide. And so at the same time, defenders are operating under increasing constraints. Organizations now manage anywhere from 3 to 6 different compliance frameworks. Some of them, like ISO and NIST, have over 1,000 unique cybersecurity controls. And then the average organization is also running anywhere from 45 to 75 unique security tools, many of which aren't fully integrated or share context between them. We're seeing customer security questionnaires regularly exceeding 200 questions that I know everyone loves to fill out. And globally, there's over 4 million unfilled cybersecurity roles. So on one side, while the attacks are accelerating and industrializing, defenders are having to manage tool sprawl, regulatory pressure, fragmented visibility, and talent shortages. So the security leaders and practitioners aren't lacking data, they're really drowning in it. And so they're being asked to then manage more risk with more complexity, more compliance requirements with fewer people and tighter budgets. And so that's really the tension organizations are operating under today that we see.
Yeah, and just for our clients, the conversations that we're having, right? IT is obviously, running the infrastructure, the networking, the end user support side of the fence, but oftentimes we see our customers also being tasked with cybersecurity as well. So the barrier to entry that we see for sophisticated attacks is no longer what it was 3, 4, 5 years ago with the rise of AI. So, being able to kind of tilt the scales back in favor of the defenders is something that we evaluate with every discussion that we have with our clients.
And so really what we're seeing is cyber risk isn't necessarily a visibility problem. It's really a prioritization problem. And so in prior roles, I regularly hired some of the largest cybersecurity consulting firms in the world to conduct enterprise cyber risk assessments. And so these engagements often cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. They took weeks, sometimes months to complete. And they delivered very comprehensive reports with detailed findings, hundreds of pages of documentation. But in reality, what we really needed wasn't a 200-page PDF. It was clarity, it was prioritization, and a roadmap we could actually execute, quickly and effectively. And so when I joined Redesign over 4 years ago, we asked ourselves really a simple question of how do we deliver the same level of strategic insight without the significant cost, delays, and complexity of the assessments themselves? And so that's why we've built what we call the rapid risk assessment. And so it's grounded in our experience conducting hundreds of risk assessments, penetration tests, and building kind of security program transformations. But instead of focusing on the documentation, it's really focused on decision making. Instead of producing a static report, it prioritizes action. And so it's designed to help organizations move from assessment to prioritization to execution. And so here's how we solve that prioritization problem. The rapid risk assessment, it's designed to give you that clarity quickly without months of consulting and a 6-figure engagement. It's built by practitioners who have run enterprise cybersecurity programs, who understand what leadership actually needs to make confident decisions. And the approach is simple. First, we assess your cybersecurity posture against domains that matter most. And then second, we prioritize the risks based on impact, their likelihood, and most importantly, business context. So it's not just a control gap. And finally, we translate all of this into a clear 24-month roadmap that's tied to real remediation paths, whether that's a technology investment, professional services, or managed security support. The outcome isn't a static report, it's a prioritized action plan that you can execute. And so let me show you exactly how that works. And so, one of the challenges I personally experienced in prior roles was getting a daily, reliable view of the health of our cybersecurity and compliance program. And so we spent an enormous amount of time pulling data from different tools, building PowerPoint decks that everyone loves, creating Power BI reports, just to gain that visibility and report on the status of our program. It was reactive, it was manual, it wasn't sustainable. And so we built the Redesign Trust Portal to serve as a single pane of glass that gives you a programmatic real-time view of the key attributes of your security and compliance program. And it integrates with your existing security tech stack to provide meaningful insights, not just raw metrics and reports. And it goes beyond dashboards. It gives visibility into your compliance posture, your key risks, critical vulnerabilities, security incidents, and your attack surface all in one place. The rapid risk assessment is a module within this trust portal. And so it consists of 60 carefully selected questions based on our experience conducting hundreds of assessments and responding to real world incidents. And so once completed, we schedule a dedicated 1-hour session where we walk through the results with you in detail. You're not just receiving an automated report. I personally sit down with each customer and walk them through their security program. We interpret the results and help answer any questions you have based on our experience over the past 20 years, building and leading cybersecurity programs.
I think one of the things that we often hear from our clients, right, is going back to what Patrick highlighted earlier. There's so many different cybersecurity frameworks out there. There's so much demand from existing and prospective customers to fill out risk assessments. They all have their own sets of questions and frameworks that they're operating against, even though most of the spirit of what they're looking to understand about your cybersecurity program is really the same. So what we've done here is we've tried to create a process that's free, quick, and led by Patrick that allows you to get that quick viewpoint into it. And then within the trust portal here, we actually offer the ability to map the results of this assessment against not just one, but multiple frameworks. And that can be industry standard frameworks, or that could be frameworks that you have internally for your own program. So the duplicative work in that instance really goes away, which is what, we're just trying to really decrease the level of complexity around what it looks like to have a healthy cybersecurity program today. And we feel like this is the first step in doing so.
Yep, and spot on, Troy. And so now I'm going to talk through the risk categorization framework. And so really what differentiates our approach is that we tie every risk back to business impact. This isn't just a technical scoring exercise. We start by first evaluating control implementation. So is the control fully implemented, partially implemented, or not implemented at all? For example, do you have multi-factor authentication in place? But more importantly, is it consistently deployed across all of your users in critical applications? But we don't stop just at implementation. We evaluate the control in the context of its business impact. So if MFA is missing on a non-critical internal system, that's one level of risk. But if MFA is missing on an administrative account for a mission-critical business application, that's a very materially different level of exposure. And that's how we determine whether it's something low, medium, high, or critical. Once the impact is understood, we assign a structured risk score, but more importantly, a remediation timeline that's tied to it. Critical risks require action within 1 to 3 months. Those are the things you want to fix as soon as possible. High risks within the 3 to 12 month time frame. And then medium risks are addressed strategically over 12 to 24 months. And then low risks really are types of things that would fall within your regular and ongoing maintenance procedures. And so this ensures your roadmap isn't just aligned to control gaps, but actually to the business risk. And now we're going to show you how to translate our assessment process into the risk categorization framework into the deliverables.
Just one thing to highlight here, if you look at the remediation timelines for other providers that anybody on the webinar has worked with for paid cyber risk assessments, you know that it's a pretty intensive, laborious process to go through the control framework, answer the questions, dig through OneDrive or, paper documentation to find what they might be looking for evidence against the controls. And oftentimes that can be a 3 to 6 month process to complete those assessments. Our opinion of it is we want to give you a very quick lens into gaps that may have critical business impact in the event of a cyber attack. And we feel like we could do that quickly, efficiently, and produce an enterprise grade deliverable for you and your team to then go action. I would also just highlight, right, that take it to the next slide for Patrick here. Everything that we're trying to do within this assessment is completely vendor agnostic, including, Redesign's own services and solutions that we offer. So this is really just meant to be, for you and for your teams to understand where Redesign feels like you may have gaps in your environment today, but we're not necessarily tying this back within the deliverable itself to partners or services that we can sell. It's really meant to focus on outcomes at this point.
Yeah, appreciate it, Troy. And so this scorecard provides that executive level view of your overall security posture against those redesigned security controls framework. So think of it as a heat map of your entire cybersecurity program. Green areas representing areas of strength, yellow and red indicating increasing levels of risk, and purple highlights specifically critical exposure, so real foundational gaps that require immediate attention. And so we built this framework based on our real world experience, and we've aligned it to a number of the leading industry frameworks such as CIS controls or NIST or ISO. But instead of overwhelming our customers and organizations with hundreds of requirements, we distilled it down to what we feel are the 60 most important controls that every organization, really regardless of size or industry, should have in place. And so those 60 controls are organized across the 16 core security domains you see across the screen here. And so that includes everything from identity and access management to cloud security to governance, risk and compliance, and so on. And so in this example, and this is a redacted example from a previous customer we had done, the organization had implemented roughly 60% of the controls effectively. So 20% were partially implemented, representing medium risk, 15% representing high risk, and 5% of the controls were deemed critical, meaning the foundational controls should be addressed immediately. And so what this does is it gives leadership immediate clarity on, where are we strong? Where did we receive good returns on our investment? Where are we exposed? And then what needs attention first in a prioritized order? And so it helps allow boards, executive teams, and so on to really quickly and effectively understand their cyber risk, in a matter of minutes. And so now I'm going to show you how we frame up the critical risks with our observations and our recommendations that we would do in a review of a rapid risk assessment.
And just something to highlight as a part of this, right? All the context that we gather through that discussion with our customers is brought into consideration here. This isn't just a automated online assessment that you click into, answer a bunch of questions, and it spits out answers from AI or a model that we've developed. It's really contextual. It's based on actual discussions with you and your team around what you guys are trying to, what your environment looks like, what the program has been to date, and what you may be trying to accomplish in the future. So there's a level of customer feedback that's included within this scorecard as well.
Great. So the next part of the rapid risk assessment review is really focused on the discussion around critical risks. So the gaps that are requiring immediate attention. So in this example, the organization had 3 critical risks. The first one being incomplete multi-factor authentication coverage. And so this particular organization had an MFA solution in place, but it wasn't consistently deployed across the administrative accounts and SaaS applications. So they had previously experienced targeted spear phishing attempts. So if an attacker were to capture those credentials, the username and the password, they would have been able to gain administrative access into their environments where MFA wasn't fully enforced. So this is why it represented a foundational control gap and one that significantly increased the likelihood of compromise. And Troy, if you just go back one side, I'm going to jump into that in just a second. And so kind of the second risk was around 24/7 monitoring and response. And so really this organization had a next-gen antivirus, an endpoint detection and response or EDR tool in place. However, the alerts from those were only monitored during normal business hours by their internal team. So think of it as Monday through Friday on a 9 to 5 basis. We know that the attacker breakout time now is measured in minutes, not hours. And so if a security incident were to happen, whether it's overnight, on a weekend, or a holiday, those delays in their detection dramatically increases the impact of the attack. And so security tooling without continuous monitoring creates that dangerous gap between your detection and your response. And then the third critical risk was around offline immutable backups. And so this organization had invested in their disaster recovery infrastructure. However, their backups were not offline and immutable. And so in the case of a ransomware attack or a ransomware incident, one of the first things attackers are going to target is those backup systems. They're going to look for whether or not those backup systems can be encrypted or deleted, which becomes significantly more difficult, giving them more leverage, to try and obtain a ransom payment. So offline immutable backups are one of the most effective controls for implementing against, preventing and reducing the impact of a potential ransomware attack. And so really, the purpose of this section wasn't to create fear or FUD, it's about clarity. And so it's helping our customers understand these foundational risks that materially change an organization's exposure profile. And that's exactly why we prioritize these first. And so now this is a sample slide of the type of review we would do for each of these critical risks. So once we identify a critical risk, we don't stop at just labeling it. We really provide, as Troy mentioned, vendor agnostic observations and actionable recommendations that either the organization can take themselves or they can take through a third party like Redesign. These recommendations are tailored to your industry, your regulatory environment, customer obligations, and increasingly cyber insurance requirements. And so we're really addressing the full spectrum of improvement, the people, their skill sets, the process, as well as the technology around a given risk or a given control. And so, for example, in this case of incomplete MFA coverage, the solution wasn't simply to turn MFA on. It involved everything from establishing an organization-wide MFA policy, centralizing their identity and access management systems, strengthening their authentication factors beyond just SMS or texting, implementing monitoring and reporting for enforcement, embedding MFA into their onboarding and change control processes. And that's why we view incomplete MFA as a categorical critical risk. It's not just a configuration issue, it's really a foundational control that materially impacts the organization's exposure to credential-based attacks, audit findings, or potentially insurance ineligibility. And so our goal isn't to recommend products, as Troy mentioned. It's really to help provide a structured, defensible path to truly close the gap of this critical risk.
One of the things that we're trying to present our clients with here, it is a roadmap essentially for both technical and non-technical stakeholders alike to be able to understand why is this a gap? What's the risk if we don't fill this gap? And how can we go take an introductory set of steps to fill this and then progress it to a point where there's a mature practice around it. So, Patrick, back to you.
We can dive into the second critical risk, which is around not having a managed detection and response program or provider in place. And so this is why organizations that do not have 24/7 security monitoring incident response coverage are exposed to significant operational risk. Security tools that are generating alerts, it happens around the clock, but the attackers don't operate on your normal business hours. So if monitoring occurs during that 9 to 5 window, any incident that happens overnight, weekend, during a holiday may go undetected for hours or if not days. And so we know now that the modern attacker's breakout time is measured in minutes. That gap between detection and response is really where the real risk lives. And so without continuous monitoring and response, these alerts may sit unreviewed with lateral movement going unnoticed, and eventually data exfiltration may occur before actual containment or the alert was reviewed in the first place. And so this is why we classify having a lack of 24/7 monitoring as a critical exposure, even if the organization has strong endpoint network security tools in place, because your security posture isn't just defined by your detection, it's really all about your response speed. And then the third critical risk was, again, no offline or immutable backups. And so, many organizations invest heavily in their disaster recovery infrastructure through replication, failover environments, high availability. But ransomware has fundamentally changed that threat model. So modern attackers deliberately target your backup systems early in their attack lifecycle because they know if the backups are online, connected, or alterable, they can be encrypted the same as any of your other data sets. At that point, recovery options become severely limited, allowing the attackers to achieve their objectives and trying to extort or obtain some sort of paid ransom. And so without having immutable and air-gapped backups, your recovery times are going to increase. Business interruption likely is increasing. Regulatory exposure increases. And the pressure to pay ransom also increases. And so immutable backups provides that last line of defense so that you can ensure, even in a worst case scenario, organizations retain a clean recovery point that cannot be altered, it cannot be destroyed. So it's more than just an IT control, it's a real business continuity safeguard. And so in today's threat landscape, recovery capability is just as important as a preventative type control. And Troy, if you go to the next slide. And so now I'm going to talk through a sample remediation roadmap. And so this is where the rapid risk assessment becomes actionable. So this roadmap translates into a real structured, time-bound execution plan. And so across the top is the timeline, excuse me, and along the side is your priority. And so we focus on the critical risks first, so foundational controls that can materially reduce your exposure. But in the short term, typically within 1 to 3 months is where we want to address the highest impact items. So in this use case, based on those critical risks that we just walked through, this would be the full deployment and rollout of their multi-factor authentication and corresponding processes, establishment of a 24/7 monitoring and response capability, and then implementing those offline and immutable backups. And so these are the controls that most significantly reduce breach probability, ransomware impact. And so that once they're addressed, we can move into high priority initiatives over the next 3 to 12 months, such as strengthening their disaster recovery process, conducting a business impact analysis. Then in the medium to longer term, they can focus on more strategic initiatives, such as conducting regular penetration testing, developing a zero trust strategy across their security architecture. And so what's really important here is sequencing. We don't recommend doing everything at once. We understand that's not possible or feasible. It's really about recommending doing the things in the right sequential order that give you the biggest return on your investment for reducing risk. And so this roadmap helps you provide your leadership with clarity on what reduces risk the fastest, where you want to allocate budget, how to mature your program over time. But the roadmap alone doesn't obviously reduce the risk. It's really about that execution, which is where our redesign services and solutions come in. And before I hand it over to Troy, I wanted to use one recent example. We were working with a customer who actually had money and budget set aside for a risk assessment. After they went through this free rapid risk assessment, they were able to use that to brief their leadership as an assessment and remediation roadmap, and they were able to repurpose those funds for the assessment themselves to actually remediate some of the findings that were a result of it. So it's a nice win for the customer, saving money, maturing their security program that came as a direct result of this rapid risk assessment. So with that, Troy, I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think obviously this is a partial example of what a deliverable looks like coming out of the assessment here. Basically, right, it's just a more detailed look at each category, how you responded to the questions, even if you're meeting the control today, right? We may have an opinion or an example where we've worked with a current customer to help them bolster, that part of their defenses or that part of their program. I will highlight, right, Patrick does have a large team of engineers and analysts that work for him that have discipline expertise in a lot of these different areas, whether it's on the detection, the response, or the governance, risk, and compliance side. So it's not just Patrick that is running these assessments with our customers. We have a team of experts that we pull in for these discussions. After the deliverable is handed over to the customer, there is a set of follow-up items that Redesign can assist with. As Patrick and I have mentioned multiple times throughout this is vendor agnostic. So no, no sales pressure, no sales approach or angle that we're trying to present with this assessment. This is really meant to be a value add for our clients. In the event that we present this and there is a desire to have Redesign step in and perform any type of additional assessment, architectural discussions, solution sizing, things like that, we certainly can do so. We have a few different areas of the practice where we're helping clients today. The first is around advisory services. So these are tactical professional services engagements that typically come as a follow-on to the rapid risk assessment. There's three different areas that we're servicing clients in today. Apologies that this PowerPoint slide has adversary twice here. The first bucket is around risk strategy and compliance readiness. So think of this as broader cyber risk assessments against frameworks like NIST or like ISO, AI governance and risk assessment. So obviously the proliferation of AI, whether approved or not approved by companies, has been a topic of conversation for the last 24 months for us and for our clients. So we're going in and helping clients assess their use of AI across the organization today, and then helping them identify a path forward for the improved use of AI across their lines of business. And then, as I mentioned at the start of the conversation here, Patrick does serve as a virtual CISO for many of our clients in a fractional capacity. So we can help with kind of the prepare and assess side of the house, any of the services that you see on the left-hand side of the screen. When we talk about actual, testing of controls, we get into the middle bucket related to offensive security and adversary simulation. So things like pen testing, things like cloud security testing, these would fall into this bucket. Patrick's offensive security team from the London Stock Exchange Group, many of them are also here with us at Redesign and are some of the best in the world on the offensive security side. And then after the offensive security engagements, oftentimes we'll assist with response and resilience engagements. So this can be related to things like tabletop exercises for cross-functional teams or technical teams, the review or development of incident response plans, and then many of the other services that you see here. These are tactical project-based engagements. And then on the OEM side, obviously Patrick had mentioned there the 24/7 monitoring, the offline immutable backups. There's obviously a number of areas that we can make recommendations on or have an opinion on when it comes to hardware and software solutions to fill security gaps. You see 9 different solution providers up on the screen here. These are by no means the only security providers that we work with, but these are the ones that we stake our claim to as being the best of breed in their individual disciplines. For Redesign, we have pre-sales expertise in each of these solution providers' portfolios, so we can help with demonstrations, proof of concepts. All of our pre-sales engineers that work on the security side are OEM certified, as well as the sales team that's servicing you. We're not trying to partner with every organization out there. We're trying to be experts in the organizations that we're recommending to our customers. From a commercials perspective, we're often the highest level of partnership tier within the programs for these vendors, meaning we get the best commercially available pricing that we pass along to our customers. And then for any of you that have worked with us on any infrastructure projects, you know that we have a white glove deployment service. This is also true on the security side. We have an in-house project management office and delivery team. We're doing hundreds of projects a year for our clients. They are also certified to deploy and configure the solutions and the security portfolios for all the solutions listed up on the screen. And that that part of our practice, right, is something we're really proud of. We have an 84 net promoter score, which is basically the top right upper quartile for all technology solutions providers, so companies like Redesign. And then finally, we do also operate as a managed security services provider. So we can come in and manage a portion of or the entirety of a cybersecurity program for customers. This includes managing the underlying technology stack from firewalls to endpoint security, email, web security, multi-factor authentication, security awareness training, as well as some of the more governance, risk, and compliance focused activities. So annual risk assessments, policy, procedure, process development, things like that. That all gets integrated into the trust portal, which Patrick mentioned earlier, as a single pane of glass for our customers. And then you have a 24/7 team that will be monitoring and responding to any threats or alerts on the back end for you. Patrick, anything else that you wanted to highlight in terms of follow-on items from the services and solutions perspective that I may not have hit on there?
The other thing I would add is we always operate in a build, operate, transfer model. So, we help a lot of customers, around the world building, standing up security programs or new technology pillars. And then we could run that for a period of time. And if the organization chooses to, bring that in-house, we can then help transfer it. And so that's something we do with any, managed service that we provide. If, an organization needs immediate capability in a certain area, we can help with that, and then eventually, help train them and build their internal capability to bring that in-house as well. Something I think separates us from some of the other providers out there.
Thanks, Patrick. Yeah, so just to kind of recap on our discussion here today, the cyber risk landscape has never been more complicated, from the barrier of entry for attacks being lowered through AI and easier access to dark web marketplaces, the lack of available cybersecurity headcount or talent for most organizations, the number of different tool sets that are required to defend against today's modern threats, and the evolving regulatory and governance risk and compliance environment makes it really, really complicated for our customers to even understand where to get started when it comes to their cybersecurity program. Redesign's offering a free rapid risk assessment service, which is led by Patrick and his team, where we'll come in, sit with your team for multiple hours to understand your current state, and then we will produce the deliverable that Patrick walked you through here today, and then present that to you. We've also presented that to executive steering committees and board of directors for previous customers free of charge as well. Coming out of that assessment, if there are any remediations that you want Redesign's assistance with, we would be happy to provide you with our opinion and our expertise in that manner. So for anybody that attended today, right, this is a free assessment that you could take. The link to this assessment can be found on our website, and I'll also post it in the chat here in just a second as well. But we really appreciate everybody taking the time this afternoon to understand what our opinion is on the landscape, how we can help, and hopefully you found some value and you're interested in taking our assessment here. The only commitment would be you and your team's time. And with that being said, we'll kind of open it up for question and answer here. I see a few Q&A in the chat already. So Sergey asked, can we get a copy of the slides? Sergey, I can reach out directly and provide a copy of the slides here. I don't know if we'd be able to mass send this out to every attendee in an easy fashion. Tom Phillip, could you talk about some of the work you're doing in the AI and large language model security space? I'm interested in figuring out how to discover and control and potentially rein in the use of this essentially. Patrick, I'll flip that over to you for commentary on AI and LLM security.
Yeah, I would say it's probably one of the most common conversations we're having these days, just given the proliferation of both Gen AI as well as internal, usage and large language models. And so I think a lot of the same principles we've taken from a cybersecurity standpoint apply. It's just kind of in a new sort of tech space in that, the first phase is that discovery. So we're seeing a lot of examples of AI sprawl with Gen AI usage across companies and minimal controls on what's being used, how it's being used, and so on. So at first it's coming in and helping organizations understand and gain visibility to the usage and the inventory of what's in place. Deciding on how to control and which ones are approved for use. And then there's a number of technologies out there now that can actually help you classify information, prevent sensitive information from going into Gen AIs and large language models on that side. And then on the internal usage side, similarly, it's how can you test and ensure you've got proper guardrails and controls of your internal LLM type usage, and that covers everything from the code and how AI can be poisoned, controlling what sensitive data it's able to share. And so there's a number of techniques and controls we help organizations implement to better govern and protect any of the AI they're using in their products, in their internal LLMs, and so on. So happy to chat with you more on that, Tom, if there's an interest.
And the only other thing I would comment on there is for anybody that's worked with us in an infrastructure capacity previously, we do have a partnership with Dell Technologies where we can provide the landing zone for the in-house development of artificial intelligence models. As well, we do have a hosting practice where we are able to help customers run AI workloads on infrastructure that Redesign hosts for you and manages for you. So there's a few different components there depending on what your organization is trying to solve for. Do not see any other questions in the chat at this point. We'll give it another minute or two for people to put their questions in. Patrick and I are happy to stay on until the top of the hour here to continue the discussion that we had here today or answer any questions that might be unrelated to what we covered.